Thank you for joining the Business Over Breakfast podcast. I'm your host, Stephen Rosenthal, and we are going to be jumping into another great episode, learning how I am starting to grow this business. I'll start a company and just do all sales and marketing for you. And him and his partner went for that, which was great.
That's awesome.
It's been good though. Like we've had some good successes. And I've been trying to scale things a little bit now, so which has been good. But then also in the same vein, it's like that's not very scalable model, like just hand over all revenue, to an outsourced company. So I tried to niche down, and one of those was in podcasting. So like starting podcasts for like B2B brands that are looking to use that as a part of their marketing, funnel. So that's what it started. And we have a couple clients and things are going well. But again, just trying to get like a sustainable model out of that, but it's fun. It's nice to have like multiple arms, to go with.
Totally.
So, it's fun.
So cool.
Yeah. But let's jump in. So you've got, I was refreshing my memory on your history, and I was just like, geez, it was awesome. So serial entrepreneur, to say the least, and made some fun moves here in 2020 recently too. But bring us back, kind of give us a little bit of a background on who Grant is.
Sure. I have wanted to be an entrepreneur since I was 12, which even I find hilarious. And I can't even explain that. It's just always been what I've wanted to do with my life, and to this day I can't avoid it. So awesome. in the early days, you're not actually allowed to own a business until you're 18, which always infuriated me. So I did lots of it's silly. You're a minor technically, you can't really you can't like be the registered owner of business. So I just did things, and none of them went very far, just lots of smoking craters. But in the high school, two things went well in like the high school days, one of which was a thrift store in Hyde Park, where I grew up in Chicago, called Encore, which was owned by a nonprofit and sort of sold donated clothing and, created money for the nonprofit, which was fun. Retail, very hard business, would never do it again. But at the time I didn't know enough about that. So we just did it.
Some people go and you'll work at the local Walmart. Grant started the local
I started the competition. Yeah, that's right. Yeah. Well, there's no clothing stores. Now there are, but at the time there were no clothing stores in Hyde Park, basically. It was weird. Yeah, it was very odd. So that was fun. And then I made a little business that created study guides for AP tests that I wrote, and then we sold over the internet. And so lots and lots of things between now and then, but that's how it all began.
Nice. That's awesome. That was eTest Notes.
eTestNotes.com. Yep. Which got acquired. It was hilarious in a very small acquisition, but
what in the world? How did that happen in high school?
Yeah. This was the first year of college. A guy emailed me out of the blue and it's like, hey, we're rolling up lots of test prep website companies, and so would like to buy yours. So we negotiated, and it was fun. It was so fun. I had my parents helping like craft the emails and so forth. I wouldn't get on a phone call with the guy because he's much more experienced. I actually know him now. He's like, oh wow, he's awesome. But I didn't want to get on a phone call because I knew that then his superior abilities would take over. So we just did it over email. Wow.
Yeah, on your terms. I like it.
That's right. So
that's awesome.
Yeah. So that was fun.
So you've always had a passion for entrepreneurship. Where does that come from, do you think? Like what's the basis of that? Or is it, like why at 12, why not 11, and what's kept it going?
Yeah. I think it was around 12, 13, because I think I learned this in biology class once, but I think that's the age at which humans develop the ability to think about themselves in the future in like a practical way. So it was basically the first moment my brain had the capacity to think about the future. It's like, I know what I want to do. I want to be an entrepreneur.
That's great.
And I truly don't know why. I think one element could be like a desire to work for yourself. I'm like that. I'm like sort of irreverent in that way. or the desire to build things, I find deeply satisfying. I feel like I feel very lucky that the thing that I happen to be passionate about is also like rewarded by society and sort of productive in a really tangible way. I feel very lucky. Like that could have
Yeah.
been my passion, could have been like baseball card collection.
Yeah.
And
Well, that is actually very profitable right now, but
I guess, yeah. So there you go. Right.
it's
I guess
blowing
there's
up.
always an opportunity.
Yeah. Yeah. I've actually looked into doing some alternative investments around
That's
baseball
incredible.
cards.
Okay, there you
So
go. See, the more you know.
it's crazy. It's seriously, it's popping off right now. It is crazy. It's like people talk about how they feel like this is kind of contemporary art collecting around sports
Interesting.
cards. It's so funny that you bring this up because
That's wild.
I've been studying this for a couple weeks.
See, so that's your passion. That's perfect.
it's not it's not though. It's just like I was like, I used to collect Pokemon, used to have like the Steelers, the 70s Steelers team cards, But that's awesome. All right, so now you're in an MBA program at University of Chicago, right? I didn't realize that until I hopped on your LinkedIn. What brought that about? Because there's some entrepreneurs that are like, no, my MBA is the streets, but
Yep.
you've been in the streets, but then you still went into the academia side. So what's
I
going
was
on?
100% one of those people that's like, what kind of idiot spends, $100,000 to learn things that you could learn in books for free or learn in real life for real? And,
Yeah.
like what, what is this? So I had a mentor in college who really encouraged me to think about it. And I told him the same thing. I'm like, that's the dumbest idea I've ever heard, basically. But my wife went to business school, Julia,
Mm-hmm.
and she had a great experience at Booth. She's actually like finishing up like imminently. And
Cool.
I
Awesome.
visited a couple classes with her and I just thought it was so interesting. I love
Yeah.
learning. I love
Yeah.
business. And it's just like, I can't not do this. And the theory was if I'm smart, I should be able to learn enough from each class and apply it to the business to pay
Mhm.
for the cost
Yeah.
of tuition. So
That's a good way
that's
to
the
think about it.
objective, but
Yeah.
it's
That's a
been
good way to
fun.
think about it. Nice and simple. Keep that in the forefront of your mind. Yeah. Um, so you've always struck me as kind of a cross between an entrepreneur and an academic, which is like I feel like so many people think that those things are mutually exclusive, or even like being academically focused, performing well in school is like almost a part of like you're conforming or something. And they always think, okay, as an entrepreneur, you have to be nonconformist, you have to take risks, blah blah blah. But you've obviously excelled in both areas. So there's a lot of myths around that, I'm sure, but I've noticed how often it's like individuals who are successful in entrepreneurship, they always like go against what everybody thinks an entrepreneur should be in one particular area. And it's a little bit of a selfish question because personally I've been battling this a little bit as well. Is like I love books, I got my little library there.
It's awesome.
But and I love to learn, but it's just like it's counter to what a lot of advice that's been given around entrepreneurship. So I would love for you to debunk some of those, you have to be a nonconformist or you have to suck at all your academics, in order to be a good entrepreneur.
Yeah. Isn't the joke like people who get A's work for the government or work for companies, people get B's work for the government, and people who get C's like employ all of you because they started companies, something like that.
Right.
Yeah. I mean, my thought process, I love learning and it's actually compulsive. I almost can't stop learning. But
Mm,
my theory with learning and entrepreneurship is that so much has already been invented
mm,
and thought through that you could literally spend your entire life just learning things that other people have already figured out and failed to apply to your industry, and you have unlimited entrepreneurial potential right there without even
mm,
inventing anything else, just applying the things that people have already thought about but not.
mm,
For example, so I have to my right like 10 books literally on this thing called the theory of constraints, which I don't know. Have you ever heard of a book called The Goal?
No.
It's like a fable kind of book. It's about a guy running a manufacturing plant that turns it around. And it was written in like the 80s and like 84. And it kicked off this whole movement called the theory of constraints, which is actually like it started in manufacturing, but then expanded to other places. It's breathtaking in terms of
Mm,
its insightfulness. And literally the entire world has forgotten about it. It was like trendy in the 80s and the 90s and
wow.
then just totally died. And the stuff is brilliant.
Wow.
Um,
How'd you
and
find it?
I read The Goal because it
Yeah.
was one of the books that a CEO of a Fortune 500 company
Oh
recommended
yeah.
to us as part of that project, which we can talk about.
The book that you did. We should talk about that.
Yeah. So read that like 4 or 5 years ago and then came back to it recently. I was like, this is awesome. I wonder if this guy wrote other books. Yes, it turns
Mm,
out he did. He wrote like
mm.
20 other books. So now I've been reading all of those and it's breathtaking. And this is like
Wow.
stuff that people have forgotten from 20 years ago.
Yeah.
And it's so much more innovative than,
Like, is it tactical? Like, what do you look for? How do you kind of compare those two things? Like, well, Gary V, Cloud and Dirt, micro, macro. How do you compare those?
yeah, this stuff is both clouds and dirt at the same time because it's very like what should you be doing, how do you manage
Mm,
well, and it's
mm,
based on like understanding the goal, understanding the necessary conditions for the goal, but it's also very practical. So for example, one of the big
mm,
things it talks about is looking at the problems or the undesirable effects that exist in a business and seeing how they relate to
mm.
each other. And you often find that they all relate to each other and that there's very few root causes. This guy's a physicist, so his view of reality comes from
Wow.
physics. And physics, in physics, you believe that there are very few root causes. So anytime you see something and there's like
Yeah.
10 problems, you're like, that's impossible. There's got to be one problem that's causing all of these. Um, it's
Mm.
just like apparently how
Wow.
physicists
This
approach
is
things.
this is a little mind blowing.
Totally. And it works. This crap works. So
Yeah.
I did
Yeah.
a survey with our team where I said, give me any problem, just problems you experience. And they came up with a list of like 100 problems in our business. I
Mm,
categorized them. Many of
mm.
them were duplicates. And I built this diagram showing which problems caused the others. And it like 80% of them came down to one thing, which is really specific and wouldn't
Wow.
make sense to anyone else. But now we're just trying to attack that thing, which has led to adding a new add-on service, has led to like really changing how we talk about our product or whatever. And if we can fix that, it fixes all these other things. It's like brilliant. This stuff is brilliant.
What?
So anyway,
That's crazy. Wow. So how do you you obviously tactically, even in your studies, you're tactically applying this stuff. When I first started in my sales career selling dental implants, reading a lot about sales, it was also about business, and I got so frustrated by the way the business was running, the way the contracts were designed, and felt so limited. I was like, I need to get out of this, like, and maybe start my own thing. And went to Stryker, felt the same exact thing. Finally, felt some freedom in entrepreneurship to design, be creative, and to apply these things. But in the same vein, though, it's still a little frustrating when I'm not performing the way that I want to be performing based off the books that I'm reading, or like be like, oh man, this is such a good key thing that if I apply, it'd be really important. Looking back, it's like, 6 months after I've read that, it's still not applied. So how do you deal with that kind of like, oh, I need to scrap everything and start over. I'm frustrated because I'm not applying this yet. How do you deal with those sorts of feelings?
yeah, I've been
Or do
trying
you
to.
have them, first of all?
Yeah, totally. Yeah. And I
Yeah.
think, I mean, I read The Goal 4 years ago and I didn't get it at all.
Yeah.
This has happened multiple times where I've read books and then only in the second time reading them does it actually click. Like How to Win Friends and Influence People. I
Yeah.
read that, thought, oh,
Mm.
that's a nice book. And then years later, because of Miles, who we both know, like he read it and he's
Yes.
like, this is breathtaking. And then only then
Yes.
did I get it. So I definitely like feel that pain.
Yeah, yeah,
Um,
that's awesome.
I feel like for me, being more structured is helpful. I'm on a structure kick right now. So I'm tracking every minute of my time and
Wow.
analyzing it. It's like right now we're
Wow.
on the clock. interview,
Yeah, I know. Wow.
podcast
This is
interviews
like,
too. But anyway, but then I can go back
man,
and
I got to get you
categorize
like
that.
at least 2 clients from this interview.
That's right. Yeah, I know. Yeah, and the time value of whatever. But that's helpful because I look at that and it's like, 50% of the time I spend on the business should really be done by someone else. It should have been delegated, and I just didn't for some reason.
Wow.
So that's interesting. So we're hiring someone who
Wow.
starts on Monday to like absorb that stuff.
Yeah.
That's one thing. I found that I do not prioritize appropriately. So phase one of that, I have little sheets like this, which you may or may not be able to see with whatever.
Yeah, when it's right in front of you, I saw it.
Yeah. It would just write down the number one thing I want to accomplish the next day, each night before. For me, very helpful because it's focused. And now I'm doing like monthly plans. What do I want to accomplish this month? Because I've found that otherwise I just sort of flounder and do whatever's there. And Yeah.
Isn't it crazy how you could work 80 hours a week for the next 3 years and literally not build anything
easily,
but feel like you're really just grinding,
grinding, man. Yeah, exactly.
It's crazy. That's why it's like, I've always been a big proponent of like massive action. One thing, if you're listening to this and not picking up on it already, every single thing that Grant has mentioned that he's been learning, there's like a very tangible, like Monday we're doing this, like we did this immediately after, I feel like that gap is huge for most people, the actual learning something and implementing. But where I was going with that is, I forget exactly where I was going with that, but I do feel like, if I'm focused on a certain task that and kind of strategic about that, even if that task isn't really accomplished, you're still learning as you're trying to build this. So what are you focused on now? Like how do you decide around that?
Yeah, I do a thing called the one thing goal. There's a book, which is also from the book project. Yeah. Awesome book, which is like, what's the ultimate goal? What's the 10-year goal? What's 5-year goal? 1 year, 3 month, 1 month. And so I do that. I'm trying to do it weekly to sort of identify, what the most important thing is. The theory of constraints books are all about that too. Their whole notion is that every system is like a chain, and every chain has one weakest link. And so if you want to improve the strength of the chain, you should be focusing all of your time on the weakest link, because all the other links actually don't matter. Which is basically what the one thing goal is trying to do too, is what's the one point of greatest leverage.
By which everything else is less important.
Exactly. Yeah. And so for me right now, unfortunately, I am the constraint for the business's growth, because I'm spending too much time not growing the business, but just like being in the business and executing. And so that's why we're hiring the guy on Monday. And that's why I'm doing this time tracking to see what are the areas that I am, wasting my capacity as the constraint. And once we fix that, the constraint will move, and then that'll be the new focus. Yeah.
So, and growing a business, people probably ultimately think about, well, like acquiring new business, right? What do you mean by that though? Like, what do you mean by growing the business?
I think 3 things. One, certainly getting new clients, which I'm helpful in like the lead generation part of that. It's very creative. I'm not a good salesperson, so we have salespeople, but I help on the lead generation side.
That's good.
The second one, which we're only now recently getting better at, is adding more value to our existing clients. We have hundreds of clients that we basically provide one service to, which anyone can tell you is like the dumbest thing ever. We should have other things that we do that are helpful.
What's your ascension strategy?
Right. Yeah. Totally.
How are you ascending your customers through new products?
Totally. And then the third, I think, is just understanding the business. We're realizing there are lots of questions about the business that are fundamental that we can't answer. Like which of our clients are most profitable, or like the best clients? We don't really know. And so trying to answer those questions so that we can be smarter in the future.
Yeah. So that's another topic that I've been thinking a lot about, especially trying something out like this podcasting business, and whether or not the tension between defining the unit economics but behind, you know, a product or some sort of service or even a division that could be a collection of products. Defining the unit economics compared to like limiting your mind around the unit economics that keeps you from the creativity, you know, that may be an extra 10% spend, but could be the next, you know, million of revenue. You know what I mean?
Totally.
So how, what do you do to protect? Are you naturally on either side of that? Like, are you naturally focused on the unit economics? Are you naturally on like, let's just make sure we've got enough in the bucket to like just be fun, you know?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm more naturally optimizing
Mm.
than I am explosive creativity,
Yeah.
certainly, which is
Okay.
also why I try and, well, any good idea I have was not actually mine. I got it from someone else or from a book or something. So that's why I
Wow.
try and focus on the learning side because I'm not naturally good at that at all.
Okay. So, wow, you've got to, so you're not good at the explosive side. And then you also said you're not good at sales. You have some good self-awareness here. um, both of which people would also say take away from entrepreneur. You should go on his LinkedIn profile if you're at this point questioning whether or not this man knows how to build a business. There's like literally 4 or 5 starting, and I sold it within like 2 years, including most recently the Roundup app, which we should probably talk about in a second here. But um, you seem comfortable. Is it true that you're comfortable with those weaknesses, and like how do you think about that?
Totally. I think the thing that makes me most proud about Nonprofit Megaphone is that everyone in the entire company is better at their job than I would be at
Mm.
their job. Our head of sales is so much better at me than selling. It's hilarious. Like probably 3 times better, mathematically 3 times better, which
Wow,
is awesome.
that's awesome.
Our head of grant management is so much better at building like a system where 30 people can serve, 360 something clients than I am.
Yeah.
It's
Wow.
comical. And
Wow.
I love that. It's inspiring.
Yeah. Wow. That is awesome. How do you find those people? Like what do you, are you good at finding people and putting them in good, like kind of evaluating talent, getting them aligned to a goal? Like what do you look at there?
With those two, I think candidly we got extremely lucky.
Hmm.
Um, yeah, they're just like so much better than I could have ever. Their names are Kathy and Amber. They're so much better than I
That's
ever could have
awesome.
imagined. It's hilarious. We've recently we now since we now hire people more regularly, we have more of a process, and the process is every time we hire someone that doesn't work out for a specific reason, we make a test that
Mm.
tests for that attribute in the future. And so
Man,
at the beginning, we found that people didn't have sort of the critical thinking intellectual capability to learn all the stuff that we had to teach them. And so now we have a critical thinking test, which is wicked hard, and everyone does much better at than I do. And we give that to everyone before we interview them. We found that some people just like weren't able to type quickly enough to be sort of effective in a remote environment. So we have a typing test. Found that people had poor grammar, which doesn't work well for writing ads, which is what we do. So now we have a grammar test. We have like 6 or 7 different tests. We have an ad writing test just to see how naturally you take to it.
wow.
And it's so much more effective than interviewing. It's comical. And so now when we choose people, we have this massive wealth of knowledge from actual things they've actually done that lets us objectively compare them to each other as opposed to
Yeah.
just like I liked that person.
Yeah. Well, and like, if you liked that person, it may have more to do with what you ate for lunch than like what they did. Because if lunch made you tired and you're just not into the interview, they come in high energy. You're like, nah, this is not, I don't like this person, you
Totally
know?
right. It's just a crapshoot. Yeah, and
Right.
it's you're basically interviewing yourself, which
Right.
like what is the point of that?
That is so true. That's scary. That's a scary thought. Wow. So how do you, let's get super tactical. How do you like deploy those tests?
So we use Indeed for
Yeah.
job application and kind of managing the process. The critical thinking test is just a Google form that's created as a
Nice.
quiz
Yeah.
that we send them a link and they fill it out.
That's
Um,
awesome.
the typing tests, we literally just send people a link to an online typing test and we say, do this and take a screenshot. And we trust that they're
Yeah.
doing it
Oh, that's awesome.
legitimately.
Yeah.
We have, others are Google Forms, or we have some other forms that do
Yeah.
kind of cooler things, but it's all
Yeah.
basically online forms.
That's awesome. That's great. So you still, it's not a replacement for interviewing, or it is?
It's not a replacement for interviewing, but we take it more seriously than the interview. We used to
Mm,
say, I liked that person, but they didn't really inspire me in the
mhm,
interview. We
mhm,
now don't care. As long as the interview was above a baseline,
mhm.
we keep everyone that's above the baseline, and then we make the decision basically on the tests,
Wow.
because the tests are more accurate.
Wow. That's awesome.
Yeah. Because
Yeah.
the problem is we've had people where we were going to hire, 5 people, and we said, let's hire 6. And then we
Mm,
add our 6th favorite candidate based on the interviews. And that
mhm.
person is the best of all the people we interviewed. And
Wow.
it's just like,
Wow.
we don't know what we're doing.
You were
We
like
don't have the
so
ability.
close to not hiring
Seriously.
that person. Wow.
Yeah. Which would have been totally game changing for the company, because they're
Yeah.
so helpful. There are a couple people I'm thinking of. There are a couple people that have interviewed twice, a year apart, and we hired them the second time, and they're incredible. And it's
Wow.
like, what were we thinking? But
Yeah. Wow. I mean, that's pretty cool. That you're able to iterate and find ways to iterate. Um, People get stuck in ruts, it's just like, I find that's to be so true mentally, even talking to people about starting their business, it's like, it's so hard to overcome some of those ruts, or have the awareness that that rut even exists, because they're so busy. Like, I got to send out 50 emails or something after this. It's like hard to take the time to think about the process and iterate.
totally.
Wow. So you're part of the entrepreneur organization. Uh-oh, getting the call here. Hang on. I'll cut this out. Forgot to turn the volume off. There we go. So you're part of the entrepreneur organization. Tell me about that. I know you, one of my questions that I had, that I ask a lot to entrepreneurs, not on this show yet, but is, how do you protect against the loneliness of entrepreneurship, and of like starting a business, or even growing that business? Even as a salesperson, you feel that, but I have a sneaking suspicion that's part of it, but also the network around that. So tell me about that organization, and what you find valuable in it.
Yeah, it's been awesome. Right after starting Nonprofit Megaphone and like making the switch to doing it full time, I wrote letters to people in Chicago who were running cool, fast growing businesses, just asking them for advice. Two
Yeah.
of them said, "You should join EO Chicago." So I was like, okay,
Oh,
I'll do it. And they're actually like awesome people and friends to this day. But it's been very, very helpful in that sense of avoiding
yeah.
the loneliness, because
Yeah.
the vast majority, I feel very fortunate to have lots of entrepreneur friends.
Mhm.
Um, uh, but like, even with that, it's hard to, you know, share about everything
Yeah.
in a way that people understand if it's so different from their
Mhm.
normal day to day.
Yeah.
So that's been awesome. And it's all other business owners, most of whom started their companies, and we all basically face the same problems at the end
Wow.
of the day.
Yeah.
And many of them have been solved by other people. And so there have been a number of times where I've thought, I've brought some problem that I thought was just intractable to groups of people within EO, and they're like, "Oh yeah, we solved that problem 3 years
Mm.
ago. This is how we did it."
Wow.
And it's cool. They're very smart. They know that entrepreneurs hate getting other people's advice,
Mm.
and so you're not allowed to give advice at all in EO. It's this deeply frowned
Wow.
upon thing. The only thing you're allowed to do is share experience. So if I said, we're
Wow.
having a problem with lead generation, you can't say, "Oh, you know what you should do is,"
Yeah.
but what you
Google it.
can
Yeah.
do, yeah, is say, "Oh, that's interesting. I had a similar experience 2 years ago where we struggled with that. This is what we did. This was the result.
Wow.
In case that's helpful, here you go."
Wow.
Which is awesome. And there have been
Yeah.
so many. There have probably been like 7 or 8 distinct decisions that EO people have helped me make, business decisions,
Yeah.
um, that have been also transformational. Like, for example, selling the Roundup app
Yeah.
was, I brought to the group like, "Hey, we have 2 businesses.
Yeah.
I'm kind of feeling stretched between the two of them. How would you guys think about that? And they were the ones that helped us think through, maybe you
Wow.
should sell it, which was
Wow.
awesome.
Yeah. Wow. That's crazy. So what does selling a business look like?
Yeah. So I've sold a business twice. Once was
Yeah.
eTest Notes and once
Yeah.
was the Roundup app. The
Yeah.
first time with eTest Notes, there was only one potential buyer,
Hmm.
which is still certainly doable.
Yeah.
In this
You got them
case,
to engage on your terms, which is very helpful.
right. Yeah. So it worked out. And I mean, they
Yeah.
needed us more than we needed them in a sense. Um, but in this, we did get two parties interested, people that we
Mm.
had previous relationships with. And that helped to, I think, more robustly value
Mm.
the business and what it was really worth. But it took, number of months. But it was a fun process. And
Yeah.
we're huge fans of the people that bought the company. It's
That's
called
great.
Flourish Change. They're doing
Flourish
all this
change.
stuff that
Yeah.
I wish I'd had the time to do, but
Yeah.
didn't. And now they're
Yeah.
doing it. And it's so fun to see sort of the vision live on and them carry it in many ways, like better than I could have. So
Mm. That's
it's been
awesome.
fun.
Yeah. Yeah. I don't know if you listen to Reid Hoffman's podcast, Masters of Scale at all. He's a co-founder of LinkedIn. It's a cool show. Um, but one of his hypotheses is that many entrepreneurs have like this underlying like secondary driver for their business that drives them beyond just like growing a massive money making organization. And I'm curious if any of that has to do with the types of businesses that you've started or focused on.
I like being able to see tangible, sort of positive impacts beyond just like job creation and
Mm-hmm.
economic activity.
Yeah.
Even though I think those are like worthwhile goals in their own right.
Yeah.
It's fun for us to be able to um, do work with nonprofits and see really tangible impact. Like when we run ads for nonprofits and get conversions, the conversions are things like someone takes a screener for a disease and potentially has a life-changing
Wow.
moment of awareness that they need
Wow.
to be doing something. It's like that's just cool stuff
That's
that you
crazy.
can make happen with ads of all things. um, it's cool being able to respond to social things like COVID.
Mm,
For example, we've had lots of nonprofits dramatically impacted by COVID. We've
mm,
helped people see the opportunity to create more online programming, and we've helped
mm,
them get their online programming out to the world.
mm.
It's just fun. I feel like when things happen in the news, almost always one of our clients is dealing with it in some way, and we can be helpful in a small way to
Yeah.
being a solution there, which is just
Yeah.
gratifying.
Yeah. Yeah. So how do you select? Because I'm sure it's probably somewhat challenging not to be like, oh man, not only do they need to develop this online platform and they need ads to drive that, let's try and develop the platform for them, or do beyond what your core business is. How do you protect against that? Because your customers are awesome people, doing awesome things. It's not just like you selling to another Fortune 500.
Yeah, it's such a temptation to dilute our focus. We are just
Mm,
focused on the Google ad grant. That's all we do,
mm,
and that's intentional.
mm.
And it is a primary driver of the strength of the business that we can just focus on one thing. So we have to try really
Wow.
hard not not to go too broad. Our
Yeah.
approach to that so far has been we have some additional services that are all pretty much directly tied into the Google grant. And
Mm.
then for everything else, we have partners that we refer people out to,
Wow.
which has been
That's a
helpful
good
because
idea. That's a good
yeah,
way to
we
do
can
it.
match people to the best,
Yeah.
partner, and it's not a dilution of our focus.
Wow. Yeah. That's interesting. I had a customer ask me for a website yesterday and I was like, yeah, sure.
Right. Yeah, we get asked that all the time, and our answer is absolutely not. But we have a few people that you should really
Yeah.
talk to because it's their bread and butter.
Wow. I need to learn from that idea. That's a good idea.
Different stages. I mean,
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah. Well, so it's funny you mentioned stages. So the other thing, I don't know if you ever read the E-Myth.
Yes.
Oh,
Huge fan.
oh my gosh, it's so good. It's on there somewhere. It's next to that red book. That
Oh, I
one
see
right
it.
there.
Yep.
Yep.
With the blue and white. Love that.
Yep. um, I love that book. And it's almost like marrying that with sort of with crossing the chasm, in the sense that it's a similar analogy where it's kind of like there is such a chasm or a rut that you can get stuck in. Like, for those who don't know, crossing the chasm, it's like really being super focused. Say you're selling, I don't know, say you're selling, nonprofit services, being like, okay, we're only serving Hyde Park companies that are helping the homeless. That's what we're focused on. And then it's like, okay, we're going to help, all Hyde Park, or, nonprofits, all Hyde Park nonprofits that are helping with homeless and like maybe job acquisition after coming out of, the prison system or something. And then it's like, okay, we're going to expand to Chicago, kind of those chasms between, those markets. I feel like that relates well with the life of an entrepreneur, somebody who's starting something, where it's like, okay, you're going to go and you're going to just claim this beachhead by action and pure power of will. And then it's like, okay, well, now that we're on the beachhead and we're like just getting swarmed with all of these, Germans on D-Day, it's like, how are we going to like actually move forward and like, be sustainable or actually build something outside of ourselves and our effort? So you've done that a couple times with businesses. Obviously, if someone's willing to buy your business, you've done that. Because they don't get you always, I'm sure.
Never.
Never. There you go. So how are you doing that? My sneaking suspicion is that it's strategic as well. But
Yeah, we think about, if you do lots of different things, like if someone asked us to build a website and we built them a website, it's not our core. And so we're not particularly good at it. And B, we don't want to be doing it long term. So whatever we learn by doing it will not be put to use at all. So it's basically trading, it's a direct trade of time for money. And it's basically like having a job. You're not building any type of repeatable advantage there. Whereas with the Google grant, we have 360 something clients. So we learn from every single one of those. It's extremely easy to add the 365th client because we've done it hundreds of times. And all of the learnings from all of those clients can be deployed to the new one. And so now you actually have an advantage. We think we're actually now the #1 manager of Google grants in the world, which is hilarious. And you're like, what? How is this possible? But that of course is now attractive. So now we have lots of clients that are big organizations that people have heard of, which makes other organizations feel a lot more comfortable. And you start getting the snowball effect that comes from focus. It's one of someone I really respect years ago said, if you want to grow faster, do less, like focus more to speed up your growth as opposed to focusing less.
Wow.
And we found it to be true.
Barrett O'Neill told me the same exact thing on a call last week. He said, or what was the exact quote? I think he said, do less to make more, I think is what he said.
Totally.
But that is exactly it. I'm about to pull it up. This is what he said. The less you do, the more you make.
Amen.
Which is good from an economic standpoint, but it's also good from like, hey, I don't want to be burnt out all the time.
And it's good for your clients because then you're actually good at that one thing. As
that's
opposed
true.
to just being a jack of all trades or whatever.
Yeah. Wow. That's interesting. So, what have you looked at? What's kind of your longer term career goals?
It's a good question. My goal would be to continue doing entrepreneurship for 3 or 4 years after I die, and that's a Warren Buffett quote. I think he said, like, I'll retire 3 to 4 years after I die, something like that. And no, so certainly to keep doing entrepreneurship, I would like to be involved in some kind of like positive impact type of industry, whether it's working with nonprofits or doing other things that kind of have that additional positive impact. But I don't know. I honestly don't
Mm,
have a super clear vision of what like 30 years from
yeah.
now looks like, other than hopefully doing what we're doing now, but maybe on a larger scale. But I'm
Yeah.
still trying to
Yeah.
figure that out.
Yeah. Yeah. That's cool. It's good to not know in some sense, because you can adapt with the times as well. If you have it all mapped out, it's a little harder to break your plan, I guess, sometimes.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
cool. So what has tell me about the book that you wrote.
The book was fun.
Yeah.
The story behind the book is that in college, me and now my wife, her name is Julia. We were not even dating at the time,
That's
but
it's one way to
it's
meet
one
your
way to,
spouse.
that's right.
Write a book together.
Yeah, we were good friends. And it was actually Miles's idea to ask the Fortune 500 CEOs for
That's
their
awesome.
book recommendations, but he was busy when we actually decided to do it. So he said, find someone else. So I found Julia. Um, and we were both not taking a lot of classes. It was finals week. So we said, all
Hmm.
right, let's do it. We wrote letters to all 500 of the Fortune 500 CEOs,
Wow.
mailed them. We took bets on how many would respond. We thought maybe like 30 or so would respond. These are like the most busy people
Yeah.
in the whole world.
Yeah.
They each have, I think they each have like 100,000 people reporting to them or something like that on
Oh my
average. It's crazy.
gosh.
So fairly busy. And we thought we'd get 30 back. So we mailed them all. 150 ended up responding, including
Wow.
multiple phone calls. Multiple people sent us books in the mail. One of them, the CEO of GameStop, ended up mentoring me for the next like 2.5 years.
What?
Every quarter we'd just get on phone calls. So anyway, it was funny. And I had like a real job after college working for a consulting company.
Yeah, yeah.
And so periodically it's like, yeah, sorry, I have to go into a conference room for my phone call with the CEO of GameStop, which caused some eye rolls. But yeah, it was awesome. And so then we read the top 52 books and
Mm.
summarized them and
Wow.
self-published our own little book, which was very fun. Um,
Yeah. Wow.
and yeah, so that's how
Wow.
I learned about the goal and a lot of interesting books like that.
Okay. Wow. That is awesome. I actually didn't know the whole backstory to that. That is so cool. I saw it one time. I was visiting Wheaton, and they have like that little section that of alumni books, and your book was there, and I was like,
Really?
yeah.
I didn't even know that. That's hilarious.
Yeah, it was awesome. I was like, "Oh wow, he wrote a
Huh.
book." It like dawned on me. I think either Miles mentioned it or something in passing. I was like, "Oh my gosh, this is unreal."
It's so funny. It was an awesome experience. It's the student card too. When you're a student,
Yeah.
everyone, they're
Oh
happy to
yeah.
talk.
Yeah, that's true. That is so true. Yeah, I feel like I've been using that a little bit around starting a business. Like, oh, I'm a young entrepreneur. Like
Totally.
I would love to get some insights, kind of thing. But it's super crazy how giving people are.
Oh
It's
yeah.
unbelievable.
Yeah. That was a big takeaway. It's like these are some of the most important people in the world. They seem to be distinguishing themselves by generosity. Like I wonder if that's how they got to where they are. Because I don't think
Wow.
that's the type of behavior that you suddenly develop when you're
No.
CEO and you have no time at all. I'm guessing it's
Yeah.
kind of been that way the whole time.
Hmm.
So it was inspiring. It's like, huh, maybe good people do finish first sometimes.
That's awesome. I love it. So, let's see where to go next here. There's so many things that I want to know about your life. um, what? So, how do you handle conflict around business and kind of I mean, I'll say it. You have a very humble way about thinking about your business and like thinking about your role in the business and kind of the immense strategy. And I don't know, it's impressive to watch you grow these businesses and hear about them from people, but how do you handle kind of the conflict or like the ego, if you will, and some of those things for either from customers, from like your employees? Yeah. How do you do
Yeah.
that?
It's interesting. My perspective on this has changed recently. I've always tried to have sort of a growth mindset that like problems are actually a good thing because it gives you an
Hmm.
opportunity to solve them. I think using some of this theory of constraint stuff and building the trees that show how problems relate to each other and how there's a core problem underneath them um, has made me even more gung ho about that. Someone emailed
Hmm.
me with a problem this week, like, hey, we kind of have a problem. This is what's happening, X, Y, and Z. And, it was clearly upsetting and like annoying. I would be
Yeah.
upset if I was in their shoes. It was
Yeah.
frustrating.
Yeah.
And I read the email and I was like, this is awesome. And I started responding like, this is awesome. Like, thanks so much for sharing. And I was like, okay, actually, that's probably not the best way to respond. But I genuinely felt like
Yeah.
excited about the
Yeah.
problem because
Wow.
it's not the core problem, but it is a
Yeah.
symptom of a core problem that we didn't know we had.
Mm.
And we actually
Wow.
solved it this morning.
Wow.
Traced it down to like sort
Yeah.
of what the root issue was. And now we have a process change that'll be better for us, better for our clients, like better for our team.
Yeah.
Um, and none
Wow.
of that would have happened had someone not been upset because they had a problem.
Yeah.
Um, and so
Wow.
that is my approach.
Yeah.
I love problems, actually.
Yeah.
It's like
That's
more
great.
problems. We used to do a survey every quarter for the team. Like, what do you think we should start doing, stop doing, keep doing? Now we're
Mm-hmm.
basically going to do a survey that says like, what are the problems? Just tell us any problem that you're
Mm.
experiencing in work.
Yeah.
And also like, what are the good things that you're experiencing? So we can find
Yeah.
the root causes of those too. But
Yeah. Now, do you feel like your people tend to gravitate to that, or does that like the being okay with problems in the sense that they're helping spur towards growth? Is that well received by your people?
I think I think people on our team are extremely team oriented. So they want the company to be successful. We
Mm,
really don't have any big, and we screen like heck for this. This is basically the whole point of the interview is we're basically
mm,
screening out people with big egos
mm,
because I just really don't, I would like prefer
yeah.
not to deal with it.
Yeah.
Um, so yeah, I think people are happy to brainstorm, like happy to figure out solutions to things. Um, and I mean, obviously, if you're the one experiencing a problem, you're not thrilled about it
Right.
yourself.
Right.
Um, but I think
Unless
people
you're
see the
Grant.
big picture. Well, yeah, and I'm not experiencing it. I'm seeing
Yeah.
it. It's
Yeah.
someone
Yeah.
else's
Yeah.
pain that
Right.
they
Right.
graciously brought to me.
Mm,
Now I maybe have
yeah.
an opportunity to try and
Yeah.
identify the root cause of.
That's great. Yeah. So do you how do you well, I think one question, and then maybe we could get a little bit bigger picture, but a little bit more tactical. How do you think about like the role of process in your business? Is it like typically most problems can be solved with process, or a change in process? And then what is your process for implementing process? Like, how do you throw things out and put new things in, things like that?
Yeah. We learned this the hard way a couple times that once you get to a certain size, you have to be a little bit more thoughtful in dealing
Mm,
with processes.
mhm.
Um, when there's like six of you, you can just say, okay, everyone, new process. This is what it is. Like any questions? No, done. Okay, break.
Yeah.
That does
Yeah.
not work as well when there are like 35 people on the team.
Wow.
Um, so
Is that how many people are on your team? 35?
36. Yeah, it's crazy.
36. Wow.
It's crazy.
That is like
Um,
a decent sized business, man. Wow.
we're a small enterprise. Yeah.
Yeah. Wow. That's awesome. I don't know why that just blew me away, but it did. That's really cool.
It-
It's so hard to build that. Congrats. That's really awesome, man.
yeah,
Anyway, I'll
it's
continue.
10% me. But yeah, so we found that we need to be more thoughtful about it. One of the things that we're learning, so I'm considering a process change right now. The approach that we're taking is I made a video about it, sort of
Mm,
explaining the pros and the cons and like
mhm,
how it relates to the different objectives that we have. And then I
mhm.
just sent everyone an anonymous survey and with a couple questions like, do you think this is a good idea, bad idea? What do you think's
Yeah.
good? What do you think's bad? Any other comments?
Yeah.
And that has
Wow.
been really helpful to like quickly gather candid feedback.
Yeah.
Um, sort of improve it. And then we've started piloting things. So like we
Mhm.
have a process change. Let's do a test. Let's see if the test works. Then let's roll it out for everyone.
Yeah, that's awesome. Wow. That's great, man. You're doing it. I'm so encouraged by this conversation. I really appreciate how you've seemingly thought through a lot of your tactics around growing the business. It's not reactionary. It reminds me of building software products too. The whole idea of technical debt, and how that can be so insurmountable once. Which technical debt, Grant built a software business. I'm selling software. It's when you're reactionary and you're building your product around the reactions and then not being strategic about architecting the product. At some point, you need to re-architect the product. So the more that you're reactionary, the more debt you're in. Is that an accurate description, you think?
Totally. Yeah,
Okay.
that's a great
Yeah.
analogy. Like you're basically building stuff with duct tape and chewing gum, as
Right.
opposed to
Yeah.
thoughtfully with.
Surprisingly, a lot of times it still stays afloat for decades, but
Yeah.
but wow, cool. So this won't be the last question because it's a tougher question, but one of the things that, I don't know if you listen to Tim Ferriss either. I love, one of the reasons why I want to start a podcasting business is because I love consuming that medium. So Tim Ferriss has a good show. One of the things that he talks about though, because he's interviewing like everyone from Hugh Jackman to LeBron James to that reporter, it starts with a C, forget her name. Trying to remember her name, but anyway, big name reporter. But he said, if you look at your resume, it's like home run, home run, home run, home run. It's like, which you definitely have hit home runs, which is awesome. I'm not going to take away from that, but I am curious, like, humanize yourself a little bit for us here. Like, what does micro failure look like for you, and how do you react to micro failure?
Yeah, I totally agree with like the home run thing. I for that reason I have on LinkedIn, which one of the ones that I'll talk about, Vibrant, spelled
Yeah.
with 2 I's. Business we tried to ventures I have attempted, certainly.
Wow.
And yeah, so that's I recently I was like, I'm going to start another business. And I killed it this past week, or I backed away from it because it's like I need to stay focused on the core. So I do this stuff all the time, and
Wow.
it often does not work at all.
Wow.
But yeah, I think each of the failures at least get like slightly more, slightly further down the path of
Yeah.
failure.
Yeah.
And
Wow,
like
that's
learn
audacious, man.
something.
You're like running a 35-person company right now, and you're like, yeah, I'm going to start another one.
Well, totally. And it was a mistake. It was like totally
Yeah.
a mistake. And actually, EO, the people in my EO forum, I asked them, for experience shares on running
Yeah.
side businesses. And they
Yeah.
shared a lot of good experiences about how that's a dumb idea. And I was like, huh,
Wow.
interesting. So
Wow.
backed out.
Yeah, that's awesome. So how do you I mean, it's awesome your perspective on how you not that you have failed in business.
No, it's awesome.
It is. So leave some parting shots for us. Like what would you say at different stages of somebody either evaluating whether or not entrepreneurship is for them, starting something, trying to get it off the ground, or building something and not really sure why or what, like what are, maybe if you could speak to those 3 buckets.
Yeah. One of the things I would say that I'm very glad we did at the beginning, that you kind of only have one shot to do, and it is at the start, is we decided on, as tacky as it sounds, a mission statement.
Mm-hmm.
And we decided on core values. And we did that by basically looking around the table at the 4 of us and saying, what is it about each other that we really like and appreciate? And what are the things that we want, that we have already, that we want everyone else to have when they join?
Mm-hmm.
And you got to do it at the beginning, because otherwise you sort of technical debt, you start growing in ways that don't actually make sense.
Yeah.
And it's almost like starting your own country, where you get to write your own constitution, your own Declaration of Independence.
Fun.
And, those words, the words that we wrote, we have 4 core values, which are honorable results. One of them used to be visionary. We now changed it to team player, because at this stage in our growth, everyone doesn't have to be a visionary, but everyone does have to be a team player. Honorable, team player, results, and go-getter are 4. And it's interesting. It just shapes everything, from then on. So that would be one thing I'd say is extremely valuable to do at the beginning. I would also just go back to the focus concept. I think it's so much easier to both start and scale a business if you can answer the question, like, what are you trying to be the best in the world at? And it's really hard to be best in the world at 6 different things at the same time. So that's our experience.
Okay. How would you mentor someone thinking about starting a business? It's not for everybody, right? So what questions should they ask themselves?
Yeah. I think it's possible for basically anyone to do if they want it enough, quote unquote. And I think wanting enough has to be motivated not only by a desire for how great it's going to be, but also by a deep aversion to not being an entrepreneur.
I
think
That's
you almost have to be running
answer.
away from something, with that something being like corporate America, because you hate it so much that you're willing to take the pain.
Spoke my story. I love that. It's so true. It's so true. All right. Well, I have 2 more minutes left on your clock, right? Or did I go over?
All good.
It's 1 minute. Oh no. So what's the first thing? This is the last question. Hopefully it's a good one. I don't know. It could be a bust, but what's the first thing that you do every day?
I do 2 things. I wake up, I have 2 phone reminders. One of them is reading the Bible, which I find to be extremely helpful. And the second one is a reminder that someday, possibly today, I will die and my wife will die. And it's just grounding, like, okay, today is a gift.
Yeah.
Let's make the most of it.
Wow. That is a great place to stop. Today is a gift. Let's make the most of it, brother. That's awesome. That's great. Well, if you want to follow Grant, just type in GRANT space HENSEL into LinkedIn. He's got an awesome series that I've enjoyed watching, of a story about how he carried $10,000 across Chicago, made a video about this is what you can have as a nonprofit. It's a pretty awesome video series there. Striking. It's great. But is that the best way for people to follow you?
Totally. Yeah. Cool. LinkedIn's perfect.
Awesome. Cool. Well, thank you, man. I appreciate your generosity.
Man. So fun. Yeah.
Part of this. It was so fun. This is super encouraging. So selfish of me. I just love talking to my friends who are doing awesome things and getting encouraged by them. But you're doing awesome things, man. This is great.
Thanks, dude. This is cool. I like the concept too, like business over breakfast or whatever. It's just like, I don't know.
Well, if you want to co-host a series, let me know. You can interview all your nonprofits.
That's right. Hey guys, non-business over breakfast.
That's awesome. Non-business. There you go. I don't have my coffee mug. I would give you a little cheers, but there you go. Cheers, brother. Cool. All right. Well, I'll let you go on with your day. It was great. Great. Thanks again for being
totally
on.
Yeah. Thanks, dude. You're the man.
Yeah. Oh, you are. You are the man.
No, you are the man.
Thank you. I appreciate you joining again for this episode of the Business Over Breakfast podcast. If you have not already, make sure you subscribe and leave a nice review for us on whatever podcast directory, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Google Play, that you have chosen to consume this wonderful podcast. Make sure you tune in again, and we look forward to seeing you.